Hello everybody peeps, episode 283, Sunday 16th of April 2023, and today I am going to be talking about a record that was very recently reissued, the Flaming Lips 10th studio record, Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. But before I get to that, I am aware, and for those of you who do, there's literally dozens of you that watch these, just to let you know, I will be reviewing the Depeche Mode LP, Memento Mori, but I want to sit with that record for a little bit longer before I do so. And also the new Metallica studio album, which came out the day before yesterday, 72 Seasons. I will be giving that one a conversation at some point. Obviously, I have to do Hardwired to Self-Destruct first. Also, I like to live with the record for a few weeks before I talk about it. All these people that do these instant reaction videos, and well, that's not very exciting, because my instant reaction to a video is often, can't somebody shut up and leave me alone long enough for me to hear the song? And mostly my reaction videos to my first listens will be a state of annoyance, cats, people, and so on. I'm trying to listen to this, leave me alone. So perhaps you don't want those. What you want is probably a more thoughtful, considered approach to the record. So if I live with the record for a few weeks, that's how it works. So what was released on Friday was the 5LP reissue version, the 21st anniversary of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. I don't have that. I have this, the 2002 UK red vinyl version, and I have a number of other picture discs, singles, EPs, and the multi-disc reissue that came out late last year. So I'm going to be talking about this and that. That's how it's going to be. How exciting. I know you're at the edge of your seats. What has Mark got to say about the 10th record by the Flips? Released on July the 16th, 2002. This is the first record where I was a proper full-blown 100% Flaming Lips fan. It's also, I think, the highest period of their commercial profile. Luckily, people have long memories, and bands don't just disappear off the face of the earth after they have a couple of hits. Most bands are able to make a career out of it. This was their highest charting record in the UK. In fact, I need to go up and look at where it got into the charts, because I've totally forgotten, and that will not do. And so that you know, I have now checked the chart positions and the sales numbers, and I put them onto my set list here, which will tell you all the things I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to blue tack this to the wall over there. So Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots is probably the biggest selling of the Flaming Lips albums. Sold 570,000 in the US as of 2009, 300,000 in the UK, about 35,000 in Australia, and well over 1 million in total across the rest of the world, which is a pretty good number. That's the kind of numbers that probably Lewis Capaldi would be very pleased to have these days, but nobody makes any money out of records anymore. It's all your touring that's staggeringly expensive. There were 3 singles released from the album, and they charted respectively at number 32, number 17 or 18, I believe, number 28, and the last one at number 17, which is odd because it wasn't really on the album, the last single, but so be it. So, without any further ado, let's go into Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. Now, the strange thing is, I think a lot of people think of this record as being a concept album, and it's kind of true and it kind of isn't, but it only really applies to the first 4 songs on the LP, which are Fight Test, One More Robot, and Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots Parts 1 and 2. What we do have, and I think this is what makes people think that this is a concept album, is the fact that the sequencing on the album is absolutely exquisite. It's one of the best sequence albums I've ever heard. And way back in the midst of time, 3 years ago, when I did Notcast number 17, and I talked about sequencing for albums, I probably should have mentioned how good this is. What it feels like is that actually the first 4 songs are actually 4 movements inside the same individual song. They're 4 parts of the same thing, and in fact the best albums feel like it's actually, each song is actually a narrative, musically, thematically, in terms of how the songs are mixed together and the crossfades that go across them, and the musical motifs that appear, and the themes and the ideas that you've got that go with there. And it creates a sense of listening to an oral version of a film, like an audio journey. Oh my god, I've gone down Seward's Corner there. But Flaming Lips, certainly the first 4 songs are immaculately sequenced. Each one of them feels like it's the perfect song to follow the preceding song and the perfect song for the song that comes after it. It all makes sense. But it opens with the number 28 hit single, Fight Test, the first song on the album, second single, I think, to be released. And it's, as an album, I think it's a wonderful thing, actually. It's really good. Now, obviously, I can inarticulately express that. It goes, yeah, man, it bangs. But more correctly, it really feels like the Flaming Lips are totally fulfilling their potential on this record. Certainly something which was hinted at, and they came very close to achieving with Soft Bulletin, something that they also did with At War with the Mystics, the album from 2006. But it really felt like they'd stepped into their own universe. And when you've got, the best bands in the world are the ones that where you listen to them and you're drawn into their world, and there's nothing else that exists, and there's this kind of like a film that's a science fiction movie, is that you've entered another universe, and it has its own rules, and it has its own internal logic, it has its own narrative, its ideas in morality, images, ideas and sounds, and it feels like you're being sucked into a completely different planet. And of course, one of the things about music is, why do people listen to music? Well, often people listen to music because they don't want to hear what's going on around them, or they want to dance to something, or they want to feel moved by something. Music is a choice, and it's not mandatory. And when people listen to music, they do so for a reason. They want to get something out of it, and obviously different strokes for different folks. I know some people that listen to music and it's just stuff, and it just happens. And then there are other people like me who do YouTube videos about it and talk endlessly about a record and around what that record means to them. For me, at least, when I listen to music, I want to be transported to a different world. I want to be taken to a completely different universe, one that complements and one that complicates my life, one that takes me away from the reality that I'm living in. Because, on a day-to-day basis, the days, the hours, the minutes, the seconds, they're not amazing. They're pretty good, but they're not amazing. And music transports me to a different world, which is, I think, one where actually I want to live. One where things make sense, where the bad guy gets the comeuppance, the guy gets the girl, or the guy gets the guy, depending on his point of view, and where everything kind of works out. And especially when you think about, where do people listen to music, and there's generally three locations. They're at home, and that's the thing that they're listening to. It's in their earbuds somewhere, or it's coming out of a computer speaker whilst they're streaming it somewhere. That's generally the three places most people listen to music that isn't live music. That is what music is, and it's displacement activity. It's distracting you from the world that you're in at the moment, or making the world that you're in at the moment a better place to be in and to live in. And so Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots is an album that feels like a mass-produced work of art, the best kind of music that there is. Here is this is a 2002 red vinyl edition, and it's a lovely pressing, by the way. I don't want to get too much into being a vinyl snob, because what matters is what's in the grooves, not how the grooves are cut. But of course, this particular record, it just feels like, even from, this was in the days when actually coloured vinyl wasn't that big a deal. These days, a band will do 17 different shades of coloured vinyl to get you to buy the album 17 times to get the album further up the charts. No, this was not that. This album was on red vinyl because that was part of the story of Yoshimi battling the Pink Robots. The concept of the album, I think, or at least the concept of the 4 songs that were on the album, the way I interpreted those to be, was around Yoshimi as an individual, and the battle with the Pink Robots being something that is trying to do you harm. It's like if you've got, for example, a cancer or leukemia or dementia or something like that, there's a thing that exists inside you that's trying to kill you or to hurt you, and that thing doesn't care about you. You're the host. You're just like the soil in which the grass grows. And the Pink Robots is Yoshimi battling the bacteria, whatever it is that is trying to negatively affect the quality of her life. It's a pretty wild concept, actually, as far as it goes out there. It ties in with science fiction and films like Inner Space and Fantastic Voyage and things like that. But at the same point, it's also a pretty accessible kind of concept. We've all been in a situation where we've been ill and we felt like something is trying to kill us and we don't quite know what it is. I had double pneumonia. That's pneumonia in both your lungs in 2014, which seems a lot less than 9 years away. And at that point, I was like, I'm not ready. I want to live. You know, I had that major health event in 2021. Again, that was the thing where I was like, no, something is trying to hurt me. And my body, it's not like your body has like a, you know, like a car control panel dashboard and it'll tell you, oh, you know, oil low, brake light, etc. You need to put a bit of fuel in, that type of thing. Bodies don't work like that at all. And Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots feels like it's an album around someone's quest to live in many ways. And some of the other lyrics, for example, Do You Realise, which is widely regarded as one of the best songs of all time. I think it's Wayne's favourite Flaming Lips song, actually, although I could be wrong. Are songs that address that from different kind of angles and different kind of approaches and concepts. So it's I think it's an absolutely stunning record. This is one of my favourite albums. And, you know, when I first heard it, which was probably late 2002, I was really like, wow, this, you know, they've done it. Now, bearing in mind it was released July 16th, 2002. If I remember correctly, July 16th, 2002 was not a great period for me. It was a really difficult time in my life, and my mind wasn't on going to see bands or buying new stuff. I'd come back from work one day in July 2002, and I'd found myself single. Which wasn't what I had on my plan of things to happen in 2002. The relationship wasn't a good one. We weren't really compatible as people, but we wanted to be in a good relationship. And what you found was, and we were both trying to make something work that couldn't work. And my then partner had decided one day whilst I was at work that they'd had enough. And they were going to go. And I came back from work and they weren't there. There was a post-it note on my computer screen and it just said, I'll be in touch about the future. I'm going. I'm like, wow, that's tough. I tried to ring them and the phone was off. And it stayed off for a very long period of time indeed. I was like, right. Because I had some questions then. I was like, well what's going on, you know? I'd known the relationship wasn't great, and I didn't think the relationship would last. The person was, they were an alcoholic. They were drinking an awful lot. They'd switch their phone off. They'd go missing for hours at end. They'd come back late at night. They'd been driving, clearly drunk driving. I was expecting a knock on the door at any point to tell me that my then partner had died in a car crash whilst drunk. I was expecting it, you know, and those disappearances were more than once a week, and they'd been going on for months. So I was very frequently coming back from work to find that they weren't there, the phone was off, and then they'd come back very close to bedtime whilst they were drunk, having driven drunk. And I was like, an accident waiting to happen. With this particular one, I just felt, no, this is different. This is not that. There's not going to be the key coming into the lock at 20 to 12 and reeking of booze. And possibly infidelity, actually. This was different. And so when this album came out, which was only less than 2 weeks after that happened, I was not in the place to receive this album. I needed to get through to the other side of the immediate concerns that I had, which I did. And then I was like, right, I'm going to go and listen to this. I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to see what it does. And so this album was something that, and I was like drifting between liking and not liking the album for a period of time. And then I saw the band on television play the Glastonbury Festival in 2003. And I was like, right, oh my God, I'm in. I'm totally in. And I never really looked back. So that BBC broadcast, that 39 minutes, which I'll link to down there, really kind of reinvigorated my love of this particular band. And so, yes, I bought the CD, I bought the singles, I bought all the things. I didn't get to see them again until 2006 for, a myriad of tedious reasons. But what matters is not how long you've been a fan, it's how much a fan you are and how the band connects to you. And that's always been the case. Sometimes I've been at U2 shows where people have judged me because I didn't see them in 1982 when I was like 8 years old. I'm like, well, frankly, that's on you, it's not on me. And so the first single from the album was released on the 19th of August 2002. It is widely regarded as one of the best songs of all time, possibly the most covered Flaming Lips song that there is. And that song is, perhaps unsurprisingly, Do You Realise? Here is the 2 CD singles released in the UK and the dreaded format, the DVD single. We'll start with the DVD single because the DVD single has, on the B-side, 2 songs that were recorded for the soundtrack of a 2001 documentary, which I think is about fishing in Oklahoma. And the B-sides are called the Southern Oklahoma Cosmic Trigger Contest and One Noodling Epic Sunset Mix number 5. Very clearly, those song titles are not absolutely essential, must-have, amazing B-sides. But it is chronologically where this process starts, because that was released to go with the soundtrack to the documentary in 2001. And they're on the DVD single, which is here. They were also on the B sides of the 2 CD singles. We had, respectively, this one here contains If I Go Mad and Funeral in My Head, and a track called Certis Major. And Certis Major says it's from the Christmas on Mars soundtrack. Christmas on Mars will appear later, but it is the Flaming Lips self-funded, self-made, self-filmed, somewhat esoteric, low-key science fiction movie, Christmas in Space, or Christmas on Mars, which was quite an experience. And Certis Major, whilst it appears on here, does reappear on the soundtrack to the Christmas on Mars film under the title Space Bible with Volume Lumps, by the way. Also on the CD are a track called Up Above the Daily Hum and Xanthi Terror. Xanthi Terror appears on the soundtrack to Christmas on Mars, called Suicides and Extraordinary Mistakes. So there you have it. There's also a track called Protillus Death March, which is called, I think, Gleaning Amazement on the soundtrack album. So nothing is truly forgotten. It's always recycled and reused. But with Do You Realise, we have possibly the best Flaming Lips song. The lyric is just an incredible moment. Best way to describe it is it talks about, do you realise that we're floating in space? Do you realise you have the most beautiful eyes? Do you realise that everybody you know somewhere else, everybody everywhere someday will die? It's a song that's played at funerals. It's a song that the first time I saw the Flaming Lips, in fact, every time I've seen the Flaming Lips, there's dedication for this song to somebody, a Flaming Lips fan who has died, normally one who was planning on going to the show that couldn't, because that kind of happens. And I just remember at the Hammersmith show in 2006, Wayne did the introduction to Do You Realise, and it's like a song where it's going to have an effect upon everybody in the room. The song was dedicated to a fan who had died, and the song had been played at his funeral, and you could hear from across the room the people that were his friends, and just the outpouring of emotion and feeling which came across. And it's a thing that sticks with you. You kind of go, yeah, this isn't just music, is it? This is much more than music. This is about humans trying to reach something that perhaps they've never really tried to reach before, trying to achieve something that they've never tried to realise. And sometimes they get within the grasping distance of that they can just reach out and touch the stars and make it. And Do You Realise is that kind of song. It's a cliche to say it's one of the best songs ever written. It absolutely is. It's one of the most meaningful. And it's a song that always reminds me also of, if you've ever been in a relationship with somebody and you've adored that somebody and you couldn't be with that somebody for whatever reason, be it distance or time or age or circumstances or anything else that caused it to happen. Is that moment where you look at somebody and you think of somebody and you realise, I still love them. they still have a beautiful face. They have the most amazing eyes. And yeah, I mean, you know, that and then that person, and you kind of go, for whatever reason, I couldn't explore a future with that person. But every time I hear that song, I think of that person. You know, I think we've all been in a situation like that. If we haven't, you know, you're very lucky. Would you like to swap? Probably not, I suspect, because then this means that you'd be spending your Sunday night talking to your mobile phone about a 21-year-old Flaming Lips album rather than something a little bit more, perhaps, meaningful. But it's one of the most amazing songs that's ever been written. Sometimes, I mean, I write songs, and I wrote a song called Lost Decade recently, where I realised that all the thoughts that were going through my head, all the ideas which I had, all of the concepts, everything I was trying to express and articulate, suddenly kind of coalesced into 4 verses, and it captured something much, much bigger than anything which you thought that song would suddenly do. And I think Do You Realise is that, as well as sometimes when you're an artist or you're a creator and you create something, you suddenly realize that I've done something really, really good here. I've created something that is more than the sum of its parts. And it's a wonderful feeling. It happens very rarely. For me, I think it happened about 6 months ago with something else that I wrote, and it happened a couple of weeks ago with the one called Lost Decade. And I think Do You Realise is just one of those songs where you suddenly realise, yes, that's a song I'm going to be listening to for the rest of my life. And I don't always feel like that about certain bands and certain songs, is the nice way of putting it. And that was the first single that was released from the album. Charted at number 32 in the UK, and was the first single. The second single, first track from the album, Fight Test. And that, I think, came out in... No, I don't think it was. I think it was Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, actually, was the second single. So I'm going to have to skip Fight Test and go to Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. And Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots is this lovely, lovely song. Obviously, we've got One More Robot, which is an instrumental. And by the way, I don't want to skip too much around the album because the singles were released out of sequence with the album. So Fight Test is the first song on the album. And it's a song around, I think, a moment where you're tested. Now, you might think, oh, Fight Test is a bit weird. It sounds like it's a volume test or something. But it's not quite like that at all. And it's a song where, as an individual, you are in a situation where there is a conflict and you have to make a decision around, do I fight or do I flight? Do I stick or do I twist? How do I respond to this? What's my instinctive feeling? What do I do? Do I lean in or do I lean away? I mean, and this could be, you know, if you've been in a moment where you've been on a date and you suddenly think, oh, I quite like this person. Do you reach your hand out to see if someone's going to reach back or not? I don't know. If there's a conflict on the same basis, do you kind of reach out, or do you kind of, decide that, as Kung Fu had it, that the true test of strength is knowing when not to use it? These are the kind of questions that float around all inside Fight Test and the lyric around, I thought it was better not to fight, to take the path and be the bigger man. It had a number of releases in various forms and configuration. Fight Tested, let me just quickly check. There was a 7-inch picture disc here. Gorgeous art, by the way, on those picture discs, which featured Thank You Jack White for the fibre optic Jesus that you gave me on the B-side, which is from the EP Fight Test. We also had, of course, the inevitable DVD single, this time backed with a radio session version of One More Robot recorded for XFM, and a cover version of Radiohead's Knives Out, alongside video and audio of Fight Test. And the cover version of Knives Out, by the way, is incredible. At this point, the Flaming Lips were doing these wonderful cover versions, playing radio sessions. They weren't just playing the album tracks. They were going, no, we're going to do something that's going to interest us for this and see how that goes. And the cover version of Knives Out is just wonderful. It's one of the best ones that there is. There's a CD single here, which is backed with Thank You Jack White for the fibre optic Jesus that you gave me, alongside the deterioration of the fight or flight response, obviously following on from the themes that were laid down in the Fight Test track. Start off with a second CD single here in the UK, again, which featured from The Strange Design of Conscience, a wonderful song about, again, the same concepts and ideas which were highlighted in the Fight Test track itself, the idea of conscience and ethics and morality and what and why and who and where and when. And then a primitive helium demo of Fight Test. Fight Test got a EP release in the United States. 7-track EP. I think it's just been issued on vinyl now, 21 years later. This features radio session versions of Kylie Minogue's Can't Get You Out of My Head, Beck's Golden Age, the KCRW version of Knives Out, a Scott Hardkiss remix of Do You Realise, The Strange Design of Conscience, and thank you Jack White for the fibre optic Jesus that you gave me. And the radio session tracks also appeared on this, which is the Flaming Lips Yoshimi Wins EP. And the Flaming Lips Yoshimi Wins EP is an EP of radio sessions featuring 8 radio session tracks recorded, almost all of which I think appear on the 21st anniversary box set. So it features a CD 101 version of Do You Realise, Can't Get You Out of My Head, Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, an AOL Sessions version of that, The Golden Age, a WXPN version of Waiting for a Superman, which is lovely, by the way, wonderful, gorgeous, acoustic, piano-led version, In the Morning of the Magicians by KCRW, Knives Out, the KCRW version, and then a WXPN version of White Christmas, just in case you were ever dreaming of a White Christmas indeed. That's Fight Test, and Fight Test is also the song that pulled itself up by its bootstraps when it became screamingly apparent that it was heavily influenced by Cat Stevens' Father and Son, and it resulted in a slight change to the writing credits. I don't think it was fully intentional. I mean, you might be aware of it. There's only so many lyrics, so many ideas, so many melodic places you can go, but I think that writing credit was justly contested. I think Cat Stevens probably got a little bit of money out of it for that. Track 2 is One More Robot, stroke Sympathy 3000-21, which is a rampaging instrumental. Actually, this album really reminds me of Dark Side of the Moon, in so much as, pardon me, it's a concept album, but it isn't. It's about common human emotions. It's sequenced very well. The second song, Like on the Run on Dark Side of the Moon, is a kind of dense instrumental, which is more of a mood piece than anything melodic. We then have Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots Part 1 and Part 2, which is very similar to the Time and Breathe section that we've got on there. And then we've got In the Morning of the Magicians as the last track on side 1, which occupies roughly the same space as Great Gig in the Sky. Then we open up with, we've put one of the very best songs right in the middle of side 2, Do You Realise, much like Us and Them on Dark Side of the Moon, buried deep inside 2, before the album comes to a rampaging conclusion. It's a very underrated record, actually. I think it's better than The Soft Bulletin. It's probably my favourite Flaming Lips album, although a couple of the recent ones have been very good. I will talk about those when we get to that point. And we have Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, which I've not really touched upon, even though it was the second single that was released from the album. So let's do that, because that's track 3. And Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots comes in a number of configurations. I have here, I only have 2 CDs for Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. I have the promotional CD, which features the radio edit and what's called the LPV edit, whatever that means, don't know idea. And one of the CD singles, which features the Scott Hardkiss remix of Do You Realise and a Japanese language version vocal of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. Now, on the Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, they also had on the CD, which I don't have, is the Can't Get You Out of My Head AOL version. That's on the Yoshimi Wins radio sessions EP. And also Fish Fly and something else, which are on the DVD single of Fight Test. Which on the DVD single of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, which is on here. So this is the DVD single of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. It features 2 more songs from the soundtrack to the One Noodling documentary. This is At the Fish Fry and the Bigots Drunk, and Galactic Melancholy. So between this and the Do You Realise CD single, you have the two songs, well, you have the four songs which made up the soundtrack to One Noodling, or OK Noodling, Okie Noodling. So that's Oklahoma is OK, where the band are based and come from. Originally Norman in Oklahoma, possibly Edmond, actually, I'm not quite sure. And the Okie Noodling soundtrack being the documentary around and set in Oklahoma. So the four tracks from that are on this DVD single and the DVD single to Do You Realise. I think that means I'll put these out of order, actually. I need to approach them from a slightly different perspective. The DVD single also features the video and audio of part one, and there is a piano-led version of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots as well, which got a release on the 5.1 version of the album, which came out in about 2005. We have track 5, side 1, In the Morning of the Magicians, the first song written for the album. It was recorded at a studio owned, it's called Trent's in Norman, Oklahoma. My ex-partner, who I was with between 2003 and 2008, came from Oklahoma. Hasn't lived there for a couple of years by the time I met them. They lived in Chicago. And I went over and spent a fair amount of time in Norman and Edmond, Oklahoma itself. Drove around Route 66 in 2004, 2007, thereabouts. Drove past Wayne's house, actually. And the Chinese restaurant where he used to work was once held up at gunpoint. And there was a number of mutual friends who knew people who knew him, that I got to know in the time when I knew them. But obviously that feels like a very different life now. It's 20 years ago since that happened, and everything has changed. You know, sometimes I think about, well, you know, the me that listened to this in 2002, 2003, 21 years ago, had all the hair up there, not down here, for example. Still have this t-shirt, by the way, still fit into this t-shirt, in case you're wondering why I haven't stood up yet. It's pink rock. You know, I think the me then wouldn't mind the me now, although I'd be pretty surprised at some of the shit that's happened in the world, like COVID and Trump and Boris and Brexit and all that type of stuff, and some of the other stuff that's happened as well. But ultimately, that's the thing with life, isn't it? Is that you chip away all the things in your life that don't look like you, and then you end up arriving like Gandalf at exactly the time he means to arrive, whether you think they're late or not. We have track 6, by the way. I'm going to move over onto Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell. And Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell got a US CD EP release, and I think this came out in the UK as well, but I can't say for definite, which didn't feature Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell as a track on it. Just a number of remixes, actually, of Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell. It was laid off by, or it was led off by 4 new songs. So Assassination of the Sun, I'm a Fly in the Sunbeam, Sunship Balloons, and the Postal Service remix of Do You Realise. And there was 1 extra track on the EP, A Change at Christmas, Let's Say It Isn't So, and then 2 remixes of Ego Tripping, one by Jason Bentley, and there's a Self-Admiration with a blow-up mix. There's also a Utah Saints mix of Ego Tripping, which appears on the box set and was on some editions in some countries, not this version at all of it. So there we have it. That's Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell, which was the 4th single that was released from the album. Although it wasn't really a single, it was an EP. Fight Test, of course, was the 2nd single. So we have four single releases from the album. We have Do You Realise, which was the UK single that went to number 18. We have Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots here, which got to, Do You Realise got to number 32. This got to number 18. I think the TV appearance for Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots features, by the way, Justin Timberlake in a bunny outfit playing bass on that UK's Top of the Pops TV show. Then we have Fight Test, which is here, which got to number 28. DVDs, CDs, and a US EP version of it, featuring pretty much everything that was on there. And then in the US only, Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell as an EP. So you've got a lot of bonus tracks. And all these bonus tracks with, I don't think, any exceptions, were compiled together on, oops, it's upside down, the 20th anniversary reissue version of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. But I've got to finish the album before I start talking about the other stuff. So we have Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell, and then we have track 7, which is Are You a Hypnotist? And that is bizarre. That and the track It's Summertime, they really kind of meld into one. I don't even think about these songs being individual songs, in the same way that I don't think about some of the stuff that's on Obscured by Clouds or the Underworld albums. I don't think of them as individual songs. I think of them as movements within a wider piece. And when you take the individual songs out, they don't feel like individual songs. They feel like you've just extracted something from you've cut it like a square out of the Mona Lisa or something. It's probably the best way to describe it. That's how I feel about those songs. And obviously we've got Then Do You Realise, and then we've got two more songs, and then the album is over. All we have is now, which is a wonderful lyric about being present in the moment. And as human beings, you're often kind of thinking about, next week, next month, next year, next decade, when this happens, when that happens. And sometimes you've got to think about, I'm living now. Don't let now drift away by focusing on something that isn't here right now. Obviously, you should make plans for Nigel. You should think about the future. You should try and predict the future. But what you can't do is you can't live in the future at the expense of the current moment, and you can't live in the past at the expense of the current moment either, which is why I don't like it when bands do old albums and they play them in form, because I'm kind of thinking, but you're not telling me anything about 2023, you're telling me everything about 1993 or 2003, and I know those. I spent a year there, I lived that, been there, done that. Tell me about now, because that's what I'm really, really interested in. And then, of course, the last track is Approaching, Pavonus Moans by Balloon, Utopia Planatia. It was originally intended for Christmas on Mars, but it was recorded and finished 7 years sooner than Christmas on Mars. So they decided to put it on the album. It was influenced by Herb Alpert's Rise, and it does use an XP80 trumpet, whatever that means, but that's a bit of kit that was in the studio at the time. They started recording the whole of the album in 2000, so it overlapped just after finishing Soft Bulletin and touring Soft Bulletin. Is that I don't think the Flaming Lips ever really recorded in terms of we're going to go in and do an album. It's like we're going to record songs. When we have songs, we'll put batches of songs together, and then when we've got enough songs and we think it hangs together as an album, we'll do the last bits of tweaking, and then voila, an album. Which explains why there's been so many Flaming Lips albums, because they don't sit down and write and record albums. They just write and record songs, and they record them as they go along, and then when they've got enough, they think, I think that's an album, and there you are. That's how it's done, really. So there's a number of other releases which came out at around about the same time. I'm going to skip through most of them if I can, but there's a couple of things which I do need to mention. The first one is the number 17 hit single, which appears on the Chemical Brothers singles album called The Golden Path, which is Wayne and Steve adding vocals and guitar to an existing Chemical Brothers track. It was called The Golden Path, and it got to number 17 in 2003. The Flaming Lips played it live, and I must admit, and I agree with the band's then drummer, The Golden Path is probably the most boring song to play on drums, because it's very, very repetitive and very monotonous. But as I've said in previous episodes, drum machines don't get bored or tired, which is why they're quite popular with certain bands. But as an actual human drummer, if you had to play The Golden Path 10 times in a row, oh my word, that would be one of the most boring things which you ever had to do. You do it because that's your job and you're going to be good at it. Doesn't mean you're going to like it. The Golden Path did get a single release CD, 12-inch, etc. I didn't buy them because it was remixes, and I wasn't particularly interested in remixes at that particular point in time. There was also, towards the end of 2003, the release of... Oh, no, it wasn't actually. It was March 2005. Came the release of a Flaming Lips compilation album called Late Night Tales from the Flaming Lips, which was effectively a mixtape. Kind of like there was a series called Back to Mine. Orbital did some. New Order did some. Flaming Lips did one where they picked out some of their favourite songs together as a compilation. and normally the band added one previously unreleased song. For this, the Flaming Lips added as their particular song a cover version of Seven Nation Army by White Stripes, which is quite an exciting little thing. And this also got a 7-inch release. Here is the 7-inch, Seven Nation Army by the Flaming Lips on black vinyl. This one's called the Harry Potter and George Bush's Severed Head Army Mix. It's not it's not very different at all. It's just an excuse to give it a slightly different name. But otherwise, identical to the version, the song Late Night Tales. In 2004, the band also released a number of other things. I'm going to go at them in a slightly roundabout fashion. They released a 7-inch, a picture of 7-inch featuring the first 2 songs to be released from Christmas on Mars, Proteinus Death March and Certis Major, which Certis Major being on the B-side of Do You Realise? Getting its first vinyl release there. That's an interesting little 7-inch with the wonderful phrase "Eat your own spaceship" on the B-side. Good advice for your people that are hungry, is to eat your own spaceship. And then also released the Flaming Lips story, The Fearless Freaks, 2-hour actually documentary with 90 minutes of bonus material about the band, compiled from their home footage and VHS tapes. Absolutely essential to understanding the Flaming Lips story, The Fearless Freaks. Is it good? That's debatable. Features a number of new songs, rare songs, live material, songs like Enthusiasm for Life Defeats Existential Fear, and Sleeping on the Roof, and a new track called Free Radicals, but also a track called The Observer. And The Observer was recorded live at the London Forum in 2003. And The Observer is a necessary part of the tale, because when we get to the 20th anniversary version of the album, it features live at the London Forum 2003. It fades out during the last track because of clipping on the CDR, because the CDR that the band were using started to deteriorate, so you needed to patch in the version of The Observer from the Fearless Freaks to get the full show. There was also a single that was released. It is SpongeBob SquarePants and the Flaming Lips Defeat the Psychic Wall of Energy, which appears on this DVD, VOID, the Video Overview in Deceleration, a compilation DVD of all the Flaming Lips DVD promotional videos in 5:1, alongside a At War with the Mystic sticker, new album coming 2006, and some extras as well, including a commentary. It's a great song. SpongeBob SquarePants and the Flaming Lips Defeat the Psychic Wall of Energy, and it appears upon this 20th anniversary version, which I'll get to talking to in a minute. 2006 also saw the release of the 5.1. Actually 2003, I think, maybe 2006. I got this one in 2006 from the Mom and Pop store in Norman, Oklahoma. The DVD and CD 5.1 mix of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, and this features the whole of the album in 5.1, mixed by Elliot Schneier, who also did the REM 5.1s, alongside DVD audio of Up Above the Daily Hum, that B-side you'll know, the Japanese version of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, If I Go Mad, the Floating in Space remix of Do You Realise, the AOL session version of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, and the CD 101 version of Do You Realise. And then on the DVD video, we have a wonderful track called Phoebe Battles the Pink Robots, which is effectively an alternate Flaming Lips studio recording of the piano arrangement of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. It's absolutely gorgeous and should have been the closing track on the LP as a hidden song after approaching Pavonus Moanings by Balloon, to really kind of close the album off, because obviously the vocal version of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots is track 3, so you then reprise the track in a slightly different form at the end, much in the same way as any great concert suite or any great classical work or a soundtrack work would repeat some of the themes and motifs from the beginning at the end to remind you that we're part of a journey. Isn't this where we came in, as the Pink Floyd had it? This CD and DVD is, I think it's quite difficult to get hold of these days. I do wonder why the CD version isn't on the isn't on the 20th anniversary multi-disc set. But I can't make decisions for other people, really. I can only understand what they put in front of me. So these versions, if you're thinking about, I really want to get into the Flaming Lips, firstly, you need a lot of space. They've done a lot of records. Secondly, you need a lot of money. They've done a lot of records. Thirdly, you probably need to get the CD and DVD versions of 5.1 because they are spectacular. Really are reference standard 5.1 mixes, as far as my opinion goes. We then have, released late last year, now recently reissued on 5 LPs, the multi-disc 20th anniversary set version of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. So if you've been going, when's Mark going to talk about those? 45 minutes in, by the way. This is a 5-disc set, and it's got 100 audio tracks on it. So let's skip this bit of packaging and just say, well, what's on here? So we've got CD1, which features the album, plus 7 or 8 demo tracks, some really interesting scratch demos, built-up versions, instrumental alternate versions. You can really see the songs being made in front of your eyes there. CD2 is Fight Test and Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell, so those 2 7-track EPs put together, plus the Utah Saints remix of Ego Tripping. So that brings us 15 songs there, 15 extra songs. You then have a non-LP disc, which features all of the B-sides. So SpongeBob and Patrick confront the psychic wall of energy, Seven Nation Army, a version of Go, which was Sparkle Horse with the Flaming Lips, the tracks from the Yoshimi Wins EP, the B-sides, a track called Dodger's Theme, with a Wayne Scratch vocal, a couple of demos, and an instrumental of Do You Realise, taken from a DAT. The fourth disc, radio sessions. Now the band, when they did radio sessions, as I've said, didn't just play songs out of their live repertoire. They put new songs in, cover versions, alternate versions, and tried to do something to keep themselves interested and curious. The band also had CDRs burned by the guys, by the engineers, and given to them for reference for their archive. And CDRs are an old technology that sometimes degrade over time, and that means towards the end of the CD, the data starts to get corrupted, skip, or go missing. Since these sessions were normally only 5 or 6 songs, all the CDRs for these were used, and we have a BBC Media Vale session. We have multiple versions of Can't Get You Out of My Head, One More Robot, Do You Realise? So we've got the BBC Made of Vale, BBC Recovered, KEXP, XFM July 2003, Fight Test, another XFM session from June 2003, another XFM session from November 2003, and a BBC session from October 2003 as well. So you get a number of rare songs on here, such as Sunship Balloons, for example. You get a cover version of Pink Floyd's Breathe from XFM from June the 26th, 2003, the day before or the day after the band went to Glastonbury. And the radio sessions disc is really essential listening. There's a number of rare songs on there. And you also get 2 live discs. This one is live at the Paradise Lounge in Boston on October the 27th, 2002, that was broadcast on radio. It features 11 songs, including some quite long Wayne intros at various points. This is when they were also the backup band for Beck Hansen. So Beck was touring, and the Flaming Lips were his band, and the Flaming Lips were also supporting Beck, which is an interesting approach to it, which meant that the Flaming Lips were also playing all the Beck songs, including The Golden Age, which they've got a gorgeous version sung by Wayne on here. And then the last live disc, live at the Forum, London, January 22nd, 2003. This features 15 songs, including the fade out of The Observer. And as I've mentioned before, the version of The Observer on here fades out because the CDR started to skip and stutter. But the version of The Observer on the Fearless Freaks soundtrack doesn't, so slot the version from the Fearless Freaks in, and you've got pretty much the whole show, because that's how the show worked. There's also a lovely bit of packaging in here. So there's a 5 LP version of Yoshimi, which was issued on Friday this week. I haven't got the 5 LP version because, as you've already worked out, I've got quite a lot of Flaming Lips stuff, and there's a limit to how much Flaming Lips stuff I can have. Instead, on the 5 LP version, I presume you've got a version of this, which is the document called The Saga, which is interviews, commentary, the band talking about, picking out specific songs from the set and talking about it, because it is 100 songs long, this set. If they talked about every song, they'd be here until a week on Thursday. And also there's a small poster for Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, which is here, which covers the 20th anniversary deluxe edition 2002 to 2022. Now, audio snobs, I'll count myself as one of these, will go, well, what about the mastering? Is it brick walls and compressed to fuck, man? The short answer is, it sounds like every Flaming Lips release ever, which is, it's loud. The vinyl is very well mastered on the 2002 release, but it is loud, and there's no two ways about it. That said, the stuff that's in here, this is really is, if you're going to do an affordable multi-disc box set, this is the way to do it. It's, I think, 6 CDs, I think. Yep, 6 CDs, 101 tracks. So you've got the album itself, which is 11 songs. You've got 2 live shows, a disc full of radio sessions, 2 discs of non-album tracks. There is a lot of stuff to go through here. It really is a wonderful experience. And about £39 on Amazon for 6 CDs, which is bargain-alicious, to put it technically. Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots is probably my favourite Flaming Lips album, actually. Maybe one of my favourite albums ever. Changed things for me when I heard this. As I said, every band has an album for me. Every band that I love, there's an album that I listen to and I go, oh, I'm in. I'm no going back. I'm in forever. This is that album, and I'm still buying Flaming Lips shit now, and there's quite a lot of it since then. And I'll get to talk about all of it in time. But that is a tale for another episode, which of course is when I'll start to talk about At War with the Mystics. Thank you if you've made it all the way through to the end. The Flaming Lips Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots is, I think, their best album. It's a very, very good record, and if you don't know it, I'd recommend giving it a listen. Also, if you're a Flaming Lips agnostic and you kind of go, well, where do I start? I think probably Yoshimi is probably the best place to start, because if you don't like this, you won't like anything, and that's where to go. So, in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. I'll see you all soon. Okay, bye. Yeah, I better switch this off, right? Otherwise it'll just like, what's the ending? More endings than Lord of the Rings. No. Get into your burning chariot, get into your ship, and just sail off into the distance and just go away and die, Frodo. Go away and die. All right, see you later. Bye.